In today's video, we will look at Terramaster and why would you want entry-level NAS. Plus, we'll also see why F2-212 may be a good choice for some of you, and what makes this less than $170 device even better than some other value-added series NASs from well-known brands such as QNAP and Synology. And yes, I do mean better. Plus, for all of you that are curious or interested, we'll see if you can run Home Assistant and should you run Home Assistant on F2-212. We'll start in a couple of seconds. Full disclosure, Terramaster did send me this device free of charge for me to test and do video if I like the device. So here is the video. I want to start with one sentence. Terramaster actually managed to pull it and do one functionality that no other brand name for the NAS has managed to do so in this portfolio. This is the entry-level market of NAS devices. And we'll talk about that in just a little bit. But of course, there are also some cons, pitfalls, or issues that you may encounter with it. We will also mention them later in the video. First, let's start with the unboxing. Besides the actual NAS device F2-212, you receive some other goodies. Not much, but also considering the price, you shouldn't expect too much. You get the power adapter with a reasonable length of cable. You also get a Category 6 Ethernet cable that you can use then to plug in this device to your network. And yes, as an entry-level NAS, it only has one port, which on the other hand should be sufficient for all of you that are looking for entry-level NAS. Mind you, this port is 1 gig port. For me, that's no issue, but for some of you, that may be issue. There is not much more in the box. You also get screws for the drive base, where you can attach 2.5 drives in a 3.5 case. You get stickers, which I really do not know what I would do with them. They are used to name drives, so you attach them to the drives or the trace or whatever, plus of course the warranty card and a quick install guide. The warranty on this device is 2 years, so it's pretty standard for devices of this type and this category. But remember that as with any or almost any NAS devices, you do not get the drives themselves. You have to provide your own drives. And the great thing about this device is that compatibility list of the hard drives that are compatible is very long, up to 22 terabytes in size. Also, this device does support on the entry-level device. This device supports various disk sizes, so you can mix and match. But also that has a downfall. For example, if you mix 4 terabyte with a 6 terabyte drive, you would be actually only using 4 terabytes in a RAID. Those extra 2 would be wasted, as far as I know. This is something similar that, for example, Synology supports, and the same things happens on Synology. So if you want to have 2 drives, try to match them at least in size. Case looks similar as most other NAS entry-level or non-entry-level devices look. The great thing is that with this series, Terramaster has also redesigned the side ventilation. And now side ventilation is actually a vent made out of logo, or logo is made out of vent. So it gives an extra passive cooling on the side of the NAS. Since this really reminds me of my Synology NASs, let me take this opportunity to mention something here. Terramaster is company creating affordable NAS devices, from entry-level up to powerful ones. This is an entry-level device, but what I wanted to say is that they take inspiration from other established vendors or brands. And now it's all up to you to decide if this is a good thing or a bad thing. I always try to look at the world with glass half full and consider this to be as flattering to those brands as they did something good. But your mileage may vary. In my opinion, why you as a consumer may like it, because you get something proven for a lower cost. But as I said, F2-212 has some surprises as it learns from other brands but also improves on it. Actually, there are just few of them, but I really do like them. Before you power the device for the first time, you need to add your own drives. As I said, the list of compatibility is very long, so you shouldn't have issue of finding either SATA or SSD drives, either 2.5 or 3.5 size drives, to attach and insert into the base. Installing the drives is super easy since it supports spring-loaded trays that can be opened easily. You just press them on top and pull the latch on the bottom, and the tray will pop out. If you are using 3.5-inch drives, you will not need any screws. You just remove plastic holders on the sides, insert the drive, push in the plastic retainers, and that's it. You can just plug the drives in your device. Actually, here I did a mistake, and this is my mistake, not mistake of Terramaster. I inserted two drives, 4 terabyte drives, in the device, of which one had errors. Unfortunately, I had issues with the installation of operating system until I removed the drive that has issues on it. After removing it, the installations went well, but we will see that in a couple of seconds. While we are already talking about drives, sizes, etc., here is something that Terramaster, this model, has, entry-level model has, but none of the other brands actually have. We are talking here about the Synology or QNAP. Remember, this is entry-level device. If you compare entry-level devices from Synology and QNAP, none of them, at the time of the recording and as far as I know, supports hot disk swapping. I've forgot that the entry-level Synology devices do not support it because last 5, 6, 7 years I've been using Plus series, and Plus series of course has hot disk swapping. This may not be a killer function for you, but remember, if one of the disk drives fails, what you'll need to do with the entry-level devices normally is power it down, replace the drive that had an error with the new drive, insert it and power the device on. And as anybody working in the IT or having any knowledge with the IT, you know that bad things happen. So while you may had only one drive that failed while the device was running, there is the possibility that the other drive would fail on the boot up. So you would lose everything. In terms of hot swapping, you have NAS working, you do not need to power it off, you just remove and replace the drive, insert it back, and start the recovery process. That way, without powering the device off, you can have everything up and running very quickly. Quickly depends on the size of the drive itself. Let's talk about connectivity. We already mentioned that the device has one Ethernet port. Besides one Ethernet port, it also has some USB ports on the back side. One is USB 2 and the other one is USB 3.0 or 3. If you need a faster Ethernet port, you could use, for example, dongle that converts 2.5 gig network to the USB 3, and then you have two ports, Ethernet ports, but you also have a faster connectivity. Two ports on the back side, this is also something that is pretty standard, not just for entry-level devices if we compare it with Synology and QNAP, but even some mid or high range tier of the devices have just two ports on the back side. Let's now talk about specs. Processor type is Realtek 1619B, ARM version 8.2, Cortex A55, 64-bit of course, quad-core 1.7 GHz. I will be posting a link to this document where you can find the full specification of the device. But let's look at some of the more important things that you should take a note. System memory is limited to 1 gig DDR4 non-ECC. And no, it's not upgradable. So this device, what you buy is what you will get. You will not be able to get more RAM, and you are just stuck with 1 gig. Believe it or not, 1 gig may be enough for devices like this. If you are considering this device to be your private cloud, to host your pictures, even if you are considering to stream the media up to 4K, you can do so on this device. You can have transcoding, you can have Plex or MB running, or even internal software, which is not that great but works, and everything will run nicely on 1 gig. But the limitation of this device is that it cannot run virtual machines, and the second limitation is that yes, while you can run Dockers, you also have to consider the memory usage, not just the memory usage of the app itself, but also the memory usage of TOS 5 or in the future TOS 6. That's the operating system from the Terramaster. We already mentioned two slots for either 2.5 or 3.5 HDD or SSDs. There is no M2 and NVMe slots here, so yeah, you can forget about them. Total capacity, raw capacity is 2 times 22 terabytes, which we already mentioned. And yes, it has drive hot swap, something that some other more premium brands do not have in entry-level devices, which is really fascinating because if you compare prices, this device is also cheaper than both entry-level from Synology or QNAP. Although I do think that QNAP with a bit more steeper price also includes 2 gigs of RAM. Internal drives support BT RFS, which I'm using on this Terramaster, and also ext4. We have one active fan that can be controlled. It can be either smart or, of course, low, medium, or high speed. As far as the noise, this device has been running on my desk for more than a month, I think even 2 months, and I don't think that in any video I recorded you've heard the noise from the vent. Of course, sometimes I can hear the drive heads moving, but the fan is really silent. If you need more information about the specific apps, protocols supported, services available out of box, go check out the specification and the link will be down in the video description. Let's start with the installation process. When you receive the device, you have to insert the drives, connect the Ethernet, and then power the device. First time, it will need to install everything because it arrives without pre-installed OS. Type in the IP address of the device in the browser and you can find it either by using the app, there is a desktop app for the Terramaster, but also going to your router and checking the IP address there. Click on Start. You can use default or custom installation process. Wait for verification process to finish, then select drives. As you can see, I got warning that I'm at risk with HDD1, but nevertheless I proceeded with the installation. Okay, so now I had issues, and that's no issue of Terramaster, that's issue of me constantly trying to install this on a drive that was suspected and I got warning for. As soon as I removed that drive, started the installation process from the beginning with just one drive, everything completed fairly quickly. I think I had everything working in around 15 minutes, and that included the download and also the installation of the operating system. After the OS installation has finished, you will receive a warning that the root user has been disabled. You need to provide username and password, confirm the password, enter the email that will be used as a security email or email for sending alerts, etc. Click on Send Code to receive code via the email, and after you receive the code, copy it in the verification code. While this verification step is actually not necessary, I do recommend it because it allows you to use some additional functionalities of this device, not actual device, but services around the device that you would normally not get without this verification process. Click on Next, select the drive. As you can see, now I have only one drive. Select type of the RAID. I selected Terramaster RAID and click on Next. If you're interested on the website, you will find more information on what T-RAID is, how it works, and why should you select that RAID over some other options. Click Next. Select the file system. I'm going for the BTRFS because it's much better, more responsive, and not so resource hungry. You will get a warning that the drives will be deleted or cleaned out. Click Next, and this should be pretty much it. It's now time to look at TOS. At the time of the recording, the TOS 5 is the latest version, but we already have TOS 6 in the preview. Read and accept the end user license agreement. And this is it. This is how the Terramaster OS looks. It will start with a storage pool and security advisor that will tell you what things are bad and what you should work on. One of the things I would recommend is file system snapshots. It's easy because you only have to tick it. You can leave it at default, but also you can play with it and tweak it to your own needs. In my opinion, running this security advisor first thing when you power on the device or start installation or configuration device is excellent option because it will, even for those of us or those of you that simply forget to do those things, to of course protect your data and your network attached storage. The power of NAS devices, no matter if it's entry level or mid level or higher tier, for both Synology, QNAP, but also Terramaster, doesn't lie only in its hardware. Actually, hardware is, I would think, just 10% of the device itself. The most important thing is the OS and the applications you can use on those devices. So let's have a look at the apps that are available, but don't forget that also Docker is available and you can install additional applications that are not actually listed here. But besides that, there is also Terramaster community page, same as Synology community page, where you can download the apps that have been created, modified, or adapted by the members of the community. You should take a note that you have to select different category. For example, there is x86 64-bit devices and also ARM devices. In our case, we have to look list for the TOS5 ARM devices. And unfortunately, the list from the community is not that large. But if you need any of those, that can be Jellyfin, Plex, Qubit Torrent, Teammate, Node.js, Radar, or Zero Tier, you are in luck because those apps come prepared from the community. This is how my UI looks currently, with some of the apps installed, while some of the apps are not installed. Let's look at the process that I went and how I browsed the apps, how I installed, for example, Docker or Terra Photos and tested them, and we will be talking about how you can customize your Terramaster F2-212. In the UI, click on App Center, and here you have a list of the apps based on the categories. We have recommended apps, all apps, or community apps. You also have option to see installed apps, and also you can check on the settings. As far as I'm concerned, the list for the entry-level NAS is sufficient. You have mostly everything a home user or somebody starting with the NASes should have. You can run your own websites through the WordPress. You have ability to install Plex for your media. There is a direct link to the community page that I've shown you previously. And the only thing that I don't like about the community page is that you have to be logged in to download the files. For example, if we look at Home Assistant, we can see that while there is a community package for it, it is not available for our OS or our platform. Also, if you take note, this is the page that was recorded a couple of weeks ago, and it had less apps available for this type of device than it currently has. And that's a good sign that the community is working and added support for new apps. One of the first apps I installed was Docker Manager. Why? Because we always love Docker. Docker allows you to install apps that are not available through the Application Center or App Center, also that are not curated by the community. You can find the repository you want, you can download and install. I did mention that previously, but remember, not everything will be supported because the device is limited in terms of memory. But for most of the apps or most of the users, this should be sufficient to install everything that maybe is not available through normal App Center. Okay, the question is now, can you actually install Home Assistant? Well, actually you can. You should go first to Registry, type in Home Assistant, search for it, select it from the list, select the tag if you want to download the latest beta version or previous versions, and click on Download. The download process will take some time, so just wait for it to finish. After it has downloaded it, click on Start or Launch, and you have to go through the setup process. Give it a name, click on Next. Now we can mount paths, and we need to mount because we need to add configuration folder. As you can see, the list that is available in Docker configuration panel is same as it would be in the file manager. I've created a folder called HAConfig. I will select it and apply. You can tick the box if you need to create a read-only folder, but we must not do that. We will be using same network as a Docker host. If you need to add any variables, you can add variables. For example, you can specify time zone here, mapping of the USB port, but don't get your hopes too high. In terms of mapping US ports, while this device does allow you to map external ports, there is currently no driver available for example, Z-Wave or Zigbee sticks. If somebody from community does create it, you can actually have Zigbee or Z-Wave stick added to Home Assistant. But currently, out of box, it will not be working because there are no drivers. Click Next, Next, and just confirm. It will take some time for this to launch, and this is it. Our Home Assistant is running and been up and running for a couple of seconds. If I type in the IP address of this device and also add port 8123 as a default port, it should allow you to create a new user or import my backup and start from the backup. It will find compatible devices, and we are good to go. This is how our Home Assistant will look if it's running in the Terramaster. Actually the same as it would look on any other device that supports Home Assistant. I mentioned there may be issues or there will be issues with the USB sticks because currently there are no drivers available. But yeah, if anybody is feeling lucky or creative, he can try and create drivers for the Z-Wave or Zigbee on this device. In terms of CPU load, yeah, there is a CPU load. We can see that the current CPU usage is around 3 to 7% and memory usage is around 50%. That means that we still have enough resources to run some other things. As always, remember that the memory and the CPU usage will not be just dependent on how many apps you are using, but actually what are those apps working on. So if you are starting with Home Assistant, this may be sufficient to run Home Assistant, to do your backups, to have a photo archive, photo viewer, and maybe do some media streaming. But as you put more items or more entities in Home Assistant, add more automations, add more integrations, it will load much more things in the RAM, and 1 gig may not be sufficient for long-term use. But for starters, it's a great device to run your Home Assistant on. Let's also look at some other options. This is, for example, Terra Photo. I'm using a lot on my Synology, the photo station, so Terra Photo is equivalent of the Synology's photo station or photo, whatever it is called now. You can specify where you want to keep your music, photo, videos, documents, etc. in the media indexer, and after you upload some media, that media will be available in the Terra Photos. I will not be covering all the functionality of all those apps because even without that, this video will be too long. Remember that when you upload media to Terra Photo, it will take some time for media to get indexed. There is some AI capability in the Terra Photo, but your mileage may vary. It may or may not work great. It is or it should be able to detect people and objects, and you should be able to sort between the objects and people. Of course, since this is an entry-level device, don't expect miracles from the AI on that device. With Docker, with Home Assistant running, with Terra Photos running, some of the media available, this is how my setup looks after it's been running for a couple of months or a month and a half. We have information about the device. It's been up and running 43 days since the last reboot. This is information about the network, the CPU, and the volume information. If we click on here, we will get more information where we can see more info about the load, the Docker information, file system, fan speed, temperature of the drives, network activity, applications. We can use resource monitoring to monitor resources in the last whatever days. We can look at what services are enabled and what services are available, how much time is spent and memory on each of those services, what processes are running, what users are connected, information about the ports, and we can also look at the logs and information about the logins, successful errors, etc. As far as the control panel, we have all the standard functionality. We have information about privileges, about the applications, remote folders, LDAP, shared folders, user groups, and users. We can set up the network services. We have information about the storage, hotspare. Hotspare actually can be, hotspare in this device because it only has 2 bays is something that you can try and do with the external drive. We have general settings and system information. But the question is, for what could you use this device? There are a ton of things, but I do primarily see this device as something where you can store all your photos, videos, documents, where you can do backups from your, for example, PCs or notebooks, and also place where you can share information if you have a small team, or information or documents shared for your family. Before we talk about the things that are missed or could be improved or cons of this device, let me show you something I wanted to show you first. How you can have HACS running if you're running it on a Terramaster inside Home Assistant. This setup is similar to those of you running it on other devices, but it can help anyone trying to set up Home Assistant with HACS in the Terramaster inside Docker. First thing you need to enable is the telnet, because we will need to SSH or telnet inside our Docker. Go to Control Panel, search for telnet, click on Terminal and SNMP. If you're using telnet, or allow SSH access with username and password, and choose the ports. Remember that the port is 9222. This is the default port for Terramaster. You can specify here port, for example, 22, but I will leave it as is. Click on Apply, then open PuTTY and try to connect that port on the IP address of Terramaster. Type in the password, and you need to type in the following command: docker execute exec -it. You have to replace this with the name of your Docker container, bash. If we go to Docker Manager and look at containers, the container name is Home Assistant with H and A capital letters. When you run that command, you should be inside the Docker container that is running Home Assistant. You only need to specify one more command: wget, and then the path to where the HACS is located. Click Enter, and this should be it. You should now restart your Home Assistant, and you should follow the documentation from the HACS to finish the installation process. And that's it. Time to talk about the negative or cons of this device. First thing is RAM. While I do know that entry-level devices, this category usually have 1 gigabit of RAM, there is actually one device from QNAP, the same price range, actually more expensive but the same category, entry-level category, that has 2 gigs of RAM. Since the RAM is not upgradable, I think it's really shame for this device that can prove to be much more than it is actually to just be limited to 1 gigs of RAM. In the long term, probably after a couple of years, you will be looking at a replacement for this device to buy something that can either have out of box more RAM or that can be upgradable or RAM that is upgradable that you can add more RAM into it. But for the purpose of this device, and this is entry level device, 1 gig should be sufficient and should be able to provide you with long term support for all of your backups, access to your cloud services through it, copying backup from your cloud services, backup of your laptops, Terra Photo, media streaming, etc. Next thing I see here as a missed opportunity is the USB ports. I said that this device has 2 USB ports, those located on the back side. It's a shame that this device also doesn't have a front USB port, because people, if they keep this on their desk, can easily access that port to copy things from USB or to USB stick. To be honest, I do have other devices that have front USB ports, but I've never used any of those front USB ports to copy anything from USB thumb drives in over 5 years. It's much easier for me, if this device is tucked away somewhere, to just copy files directly from my notebook or from my desktop PC or Mac or whatever. So while this is a missed opportunity, while it really would be awesome to have additional port on the front side, I don't see that as a big issue. And third thing is something that is con, but it is con to entry level devices. Because most of the entry level devices are ARM devices, you will be limited in the future functionality. For example, in this case, we do not have virtual machine capability, and I do like virtual machines. But compare it to other entry level from Synology QNAP, you will also not get that there. Some of them even block and don't allow you to use Docker out of box because they want to keep performance of devices high and they don't want you to break something or have you as a user degrade the performance of device by installing third-party apps. So while it's bad on one side, it may be good on the other side. But because it is ARM device, one thing I was looking forward to play is something that I cannot play on this device is the Terramaster's NVR or some kind of a surveillance related software where you can tie in the cameras and watch the streams, capture them, record them, etc. Unfortunately, there is no surveillance software for this type of device. On the other hand, I have entry-level Synology and it has surveillance functionality, but with 5 cameras that are on that device, it's barely usable. So it may be a bad thing, but on the other hand, it saves you from frustration of having non-responsive system if you put too much cameras in the surveillance part of this device. Overall, Terramaster F2-212 is a really nice entry-level device. I said that it is similar to the competitors, it is priced below the competitors, but it packs some punches that even the most popular competitors on the market do not have, such as hot swap for the drives. It's a shame that other vendors do not see this as something that should be standard in the devices, but on the other hand, it's awesome to see that there is a manufacturer that is trying to pack up as many things as it can in this small package. And yes, Terramaster is a small package. If you do get Terramaster, I recommend that you go with T-RAID, because it will allow you the same thing that some other vendors allow with their proprietary RAID systems. It will allow you to mix and match drives, to replace drives with the newer drives of the larger capacity, and then later on buy additional drives to replace the ones that have remained. So it's a nice way to slowly upgrade your network attached storage. In terms of app compatibility, I think it has everything that most home users should have. It's also very quiet, and when I say quiet, I'm not talking about drives here. This all depends on the type of the drives that you buy. I'm talking about the Terramaster device itself and its active cooling, the fan. It really is not noisy. In terms of performance, you get what you pay for, and a little bit more, in my opinion. I know that this is a limited resource device, but it still was able to chew up everything I threw at it, and it worked great. If you're looking for a simple starting solution for your home assistant, and you don't want to go with something like Home Assistant Green, Yellow, or don't want to go for old used PCs, this may be a good option because it can, as I said, run both Home Assistant, but also allows you room to grow with other cases for your network attached storage, such as, for example, photo collection, video collections, media center, and much more. Links to Terramaster website, Terramaster F2-212 specification, and community page will be down in a video description. So go check it out. It is available directly from Terramaster, but I will be also providing links to Amazon pages too. And as Terramaster is really trying to gain momentum, there are a lot of videos that have been created by Terramaster on how to do simple tasks, or also not so simple tasks, but that can guide you through all the hurdles of configuration, implementation, etc. on your Terramaster NAS devices. But before we end up this video, I really would like to thank all those wonderful people that are supporting me and that have become YouTube channel members. Thank you all for all of your support. But let's not forget each and every one of you who has watched, liked, subscribed, shared or commented on my videos. Thank you, thank you, thank you. If you too want to support the channel, you can do so by clicking join button down below and becoming a YouTube channel member for only €2 or $2 per month. Go to my merchandise store and get something there, or just get a super thanks on any videos I've created. And I will be super thankful for all of your support. I will be seeing you next time. Until then, bye bye and have